Shalom, Beth El family. It is nice to be back reviewing last week's Parsha with you again. Last week in Shul we read Parshat Vayetze, and that is the one that traces Jacob's life as he leaves the place of his nativity, having stolen the birthright and the blessing from his brother Esau. He's fleeing for his life to his uncle's home, Laban, where he'll meet his wives, Rachel and Leah, and work for 20 plus years before returning home. And I wanted to take the opportunity of Parshat Vayetze to explore the word Makom. Makom, the Hebrew word, means place. And it comes up again and again in this Torah portion. And by looking at its context, I think there are some important things we can learn about identity, about sense of self, about where we feel safe and comfortable, about culture, and ultimately about God. So that's a lot of things to set up as expectations, but hopefully we'll get to all of them. We're going to take just a few examples of the word makom from our Parsha. And if you downloaded the source sheet from our weekly email, this would be the first text on the sheet. This is right at the beginning of the Parsha. Right? We read, and Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran, and he arrived at the place, right? Bamakom, Vayalan Sham, and he slept there because the sun had set. He took some stones of the place and placed them under his head, and he lays down. And we know that this is what will become Beth El, because he's going to have a dream there of a ladder with angels going up and down, right? But there's a sense that he is Bamakom. He is in this place, whether it's a reference to the land of Israel or his home and where he's comfortable. But in this place, he sees angels. Right? There's a presence, a sense of God that he declares Bamakom. Then we fast forward a little bit. He gets to Haran, to the land of his uncle Lavan, and he meets Rachel, who he loves, and decides to work 7 years for her hand in marriage. Famous story, of course. He gets there, they get married, and he wakes up the next morning, and it's Leah. How we missed that up until then is a question for a different time. But if you look at the second text, what does it say? Laban gathered all the people of the place, and he made a feast, right? A wedding feast. It came to pass in the evening that Laban took his daughter Leah, and he brought her to him, and he came to her. And Laban gave Zilpah, his maidservant, to his daughter Leah as a maidservant. It came to pass in the morning, and behold, she was Leah. Right? Suddenly Jacob has this revelation. So he comes to Laban, right? He's upset. Wants to know what's going on here. And he says, "What is this that you have done to me? Did I not work for you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me?" Right? And what does he answer? Laban said to him, "It is not done so bimkomenu, in our place." Be makom enu means in our place. That same word though, makom, for the younger one to marry before the firstborn. And so now we get this different sense of place, right? Jacob's not in his place. He's in the place of the people. Right? That first line, Laban gathered all the people of the place, right? He's in their territory. And now he's not on his solid ground. He's not in the place of his birth. He's not with his grandfather Abraham, his father Isaac, but he's in this different place where maybe he's not so familiar with the customs. And of course, we know that his time with Laban is fraught. It's a time when he's fooled in this way. Ultimately, he works another 7 years for Rachel's hand, and then another 7 years after that to get paid for his labor. Laban continually seems to take advantage of him. He, in turn, tricks Laban back. Laban will say, "Okay, all the speckled sheep will be yours." And Jacob will do a trick to make it so that all the sheep are starting to be born speckled. And then Laban will come back and say, "Ugh, did I say speckled sheep? Right? I meant white sheep. It goes on like this. Everything's just not quite right until ultimately, finally, Jacob ups and leaves 22 years later. And he does so with Laban hot on his hands, on his heels, ready to attack him, that he thinks he's stolen from him. There is this sense of Makom, that when we are not in our place, and you can interpret this in a lot of ways. Like I said, out of the land of Israel is one way. Out of the place where we're most comfortable, the place where we're born is another way. It's also a psychological element to this, maybe. Maybe Jacob's not being in his Makom was that, he was described as sort of a pure man of the tent. He was someone who studied and took care of the house. And then he gets involved in all this trickery in last week's Parsha with his brother Esau at the prompting of his mother Rebekah, who, by the way, comes from this place, right? This is Laban's sister, so she's maybe understands these ways of trickery and deceit a little bit more. And now he's no longer in his place because of his action and because of his sense of guilt over what he's done. And so now he's off living this life that is, dealing with all these ripples of this one or two instances in his life, which, by the way, happens, right? This happens to people. One or two things happen, and they can cause years and years of heartache and reaction that we don't even know we're doing. And so maybe not being in his place for Jacob here is a spiritual thing, a psychological thing. Ultimately, he finally does leave, and as I said, Laban is ready to attack him, and they come to a peace accord. And in the third text here from chapter 31 in our Parsha, right, they set up a pile of rocks, and Laban says, this pile is a witness, and this monument is a witness that I will not pass this pile to go to you, and you shall not pass this pile and this monument to come to me to do harm. Right? So they're establishing a cold peace. Right? All this time in this other place, it's not like it was all resolved, but we're just going to choose to go our separate ways. And he continues, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor judge between us, the God of their father. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Yitzchak, Pachad Yitzchak. And Jacob slaughtered a slaughtering on the mountain, and they all ate a big meal together, right? They all knew each other. They'd been working together for a couple of decades. They ate bread and lodged on the mountain. And Laban arose early in the morning and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. And Laban went and returned to his place, right? Limkomo, to his Makom, right? He's going back to this Makom of deceit and duplicitousness. And Jacob went on his way. Now he's back on his side of this pillar of rocks. He's back in a place he recognizes. And what's the first thing that happens? Angels of God met him. Right? Just like as he was leaving, now he's back in his place and he sees angels again. And Jacob said, when he saw them, this is the camp of God. And he named the place, Shem HaMakom, Machanaim, the camp dwellings of God, or something like this, the two camps. So we see that this idea of Makom, this idea of place, is very important in Jacob's life. And there's a sense that when we are in our Makom, when we are in our place, right, that we function at our best. We live our best life. We are comfortable. Our place becomes our refuge. The problem is that just like Jacob, we don't always have the opportunity to choose our place. Sometimes we need to leave our place. We're forced to. Life, whether it's a traumatic incident that knocks us for a loop to leave our psychological and cultural and emotional place, or whether we actually have to move. Life takes funny turns. And maybe we're not in our physical place. Maybe we're interacting with people, so my place is a Jewish place. But from time to time, I'm taking to places where there aren't Jews around. And I have to, whether it's my work or a vacation, but it's a little disconcerting. So as Jews, where do we find our place when life pushes us out of what seems to be our comfort zone. And the answer comes from what we say to mourners when they've had a loss. And when someone has a loss, the traditional words of comfort of our people are Hamakom yinechem etchem betoch shar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. But that phrase, Hamakom yinachem etchem, that means may God comfort you, but the word for God is Hamakom. What kind of name is this for God, Hamakom? We call God Adonai, we call God Eloheinu, we call God all kinds of things, but the place? But this is exactly the key. This is such a gift of Judaism to us and has been for all of history. This maybe is how we survive 2,000 years without a place, because God becomes our place. And when we find ourselves lost, when we find ourselves needing a place of refuge, and there's no place in the world that seems to fit, it is God that becomes our refuge. God is a place, not a physical place, not a location like we want to connect in our heads, but a spiritual place, a place that is always there for us, always there for refuge. It happens to be that these last 2 weeks have been very hard on our Beth El community. We've suffered a lot of losses, a lot of funerals. Our employees lost people they love. Our families lost people they love. Even a child. It's been very difficult. And I was so glad to read about Yaakov and his sense of Makom, because I found myself needing a Makom, a place of refuge. It's important to remember that as long as we have a relationship with God, as long as we have a relationship with Torah and our people, and we continue to pursue that, we never have to be outside of our place. There is always a place for us. That place is Hamakom, God, who yinachem etchem, who comforts us, and all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. As long as we have God, we always have a place in this world. And I pray that we all always feel that, and that Beth El, our Beth El family, our Beth El actual building and place, helps us all see our connection to that greater Hamakom, to God. And may the weeks coming and the holidays bring us more things to celebrate so that we can more naturally find ourselves in our place again. Wish you a Shabbat Shalom.